There exists a name that echoes through Hogwarts corridors with a mixture of admiration and deep sadness. A young wizard who represented everything most noble in the magical world, but whose destiny was cruelly interrupted on a night that would forever change the history of the wizarding community. Cedric Diggory was not just another Hogwarts student. No, he was much more than that. He was the perfect example of what honor, loyalty, and true courage mean. His story goes far beyond being just a Triwizard Tournament competitor. He was a beloved son, a respected captain, and above all, an extraordinary wizard who paid the ultimate price simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Today, we're going to dive deeply into the life, deeds, and legacy of Cedric Diggory, discovering every detail of this trajectory that touched the hearts of an entire generation. And I guarantee you'll never see this story the same way again. But before we begin this exciting journey, if you're a fan of the Harry Potter universe and want more in-depth content like this, click now on the subscribe button, activate the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos, and leave here in the comments which city you're watching this video from. Let's create a magical community spread around the world. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing these incredible stories. Cedric Diggory's story begins in September or October 1977, when he was born into a respectable wizarding family. His father, Amos Diggory, worked in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures at the Ministry of Magic, a position that demonstrated the family's status and reputation in the wizarding world. Amos Diggory was known as a proud man, hard-working and extremely dedicated to his only son. Cedric's mother, whose name is not mentioned in canonical records, was also part of this loving family that raised the young wizard with solid values of justice, honesty, and hard work. And here's something you need to understand. Cedric wasn't born with a prophecy. He didn't have special powers. He wasn't the chosen one. He was just an ordinary boy from an ordinary family. But what his parents planted in him during those early years, that would change everything. From a very young age, Cedric demonstrated the qualities that would make him exceptional. Growing up as an only child in the Diggory household meant receiving all the attention and all the teachings that his parents could offer. Amos Diggory, especially, placed all his hopes and pride in Cedric, which created a deep relationship between father and son. Imagine the nights at the Diggory house, young Cedric sitting at the dinner table, eyes wide, listening to his father's fascinating stories about dragons, hippogriffs, acromantulas, and all imaginable magical creatures. And more important than the stories, the lessons. Do what's right even when it's difficult. Treat everyone with respect no matter who they are. Work hard because nothing of value comes easy. These values were planted in his heart from childhood and would flourish impressively during his years at Hogwarts. When Cedric turned 11 in 1989, he received his Hogwarts letter. As was expected, of course, but that didn't diminish the excitement. The Diggory family's emotion must have been immense. For Amos Diggory, seeing his son follow in the footsteps of the formal magical world was the realization of a dream. Cedric boarded the Hogwarts Express for the first time, beginning a journey that would transform him into the admirable wizard everyone would come to know. Upon arriving at Hogwarts and participating in the selection ceremony, the Sorting Hat had no doubts in placing him in Hufflepuff House, and this choice could not have been more appropriate. From his first year, he stood out not for being the loudest or the most showy, but for simply being good at everything he did, and for doing everything with integrity. During his first years at Hogwarts, Cedric built an impeccable reputation. He was a dedicated student who took his studies seriously. Charms classes, transfiguration, defense against the dark arts, and all other subjects received his complete attention. Cedric wasn't necessarily the most intellectually brilliant, but he compensated for any limitation with genuine effort and determination. His professors appreciated him because he was respectful, always prepared, and genuinely interested in learning. More importantly, Cedric was known for his kindness to his classmates. He didn't participate in bullying, didn't mock younger or less skilled students, and was always willing to help whoever needed it. It was also during these early years that Cedric discovered his passion for Quidditch. The most popular wizarding sport in the magical world completely captured his attention. Cedric had natural talent for flying, quick reflexes, and, most importantly, the work ethic necessary to become truly exceptional. He began training intensely, dedicating hours and hours to perfecting his skills. His position would be Seeker, that player responsible for catching the golden snitch, the winged golden ball worth 150 points that generally determines the match winner. Being a Seeker requires sharp vision, speed, courage, and the ability to make decisions in fractions of a second. Cedric possessed all these qualities. As the years passed, Cedric moved up through the years, and his reputation grew proportionally. He wasn't just another good student and good Quidditch player. Cedric was becoming a natural leader. His Hufflepuff housemates admired and respected him. He had that rare quality of making the people around him feel valued and important. He wasn't arrogant about his achievements, nor competitive in a destructive way. When other students needed help with spells or enchantments, Cedric was there. When someone felt discouraged, he offered words of encouragement. This combination of talent and humility is extremely rare, especially in teenagers, but Cedric possessed it naturally. In the 1993-1994 school year, when Cedric was in his 6th year, he had already become the captain of Hufflepuff's Quidditch team. This was a position of great prestige and responsibility. The captain doesn't just play, but also develops strategies, motivates the team, organizes training sessions, and represents his team before professors and other captains. Cedric took these responsibilities very seriously. He was demanding in training, but never cruel. He expected the best from his team, but also offered support when someone made mistakes. Under his leadership, Hufflepuff became a formidable force in the school Quidditch championship. The following year, 1994-1995, would be Cedric Diggory's last and most significant. And no one, absolutely no one, could imagine how this year would end. He was now in his 7th and final year at Hogwarts, preparing for the nastily exhausting wizarding tests, the crucial exams that would determine his professional future in the wizarding world. But this would not be an ordinary year at Hogwarts. This would be the year of the Triwizard Tournament, a legendary magical competition that hadn't happened in over a century due to its extremely dangerous nature. The tournament involved 3 schools of magic: Hogwarts, Beauxbatons Academy of Magic from France, and Durmstrang Institute from the Scandinavian region. Each school would be represented by a champion chosen by the Goblet of Fire, an ancient and powerful magical object. There were strict rules for the tournament. Only students over 17 years old could enter their names, a safety measure implemented because the tournament's tasks were notoriously dangerous, having caused deaths in the past. Cedric, who had turned 17, was qualified. He decided to put his name in the Goblet of Fire, not out of arrogance or desire for fame, but because he saw the tournament as a final challenge, an opportunity to test his skills and represent his school. For someone like Cedric, who always strived to be the best he could be, the Triwizard Tournament represented the ultimate test. When the night of the champions' selection arrived, the entire school was in suspense. The Great Hall was filled with students from all 3 schools, professors, and the Goblet of Fire glowed on its pedestal. The goblet would spit out the name of one student from each school, the one it judged most worthy of representing it. First came Victor Krum, the famous professional Quidditch player, to represent Durmstrang. No one was surprised, as Krum was already a celebrity in the wizarding world. Then came Fleur Delacour, a beautiful witch from Beauxbatons. And finally, for Hogwarts, the Goblet of Fire spat out Cedric Diggory's name. The Hufflepuff table exploded in celebration. The sound was deafening. Cedric stood up, a bit dazed but visibly emotional, and was led to the side room where the champions awaited instructions. This should have been his moment of maximum glory. He would be Hogwarts' only champion, carrying the hopes of the entire school. His father, Amos, would be radiant with pride, but then something completely unexpected and unprecedented happened, something that would change everything. The Goblet of Fire, which should have finished its function, suddenly spat out a fourth name: Harry Potter. The confusion that followed was immense. Harry Potter was only 14 years old, 2 years below the minimum age. He shouldn't even have been able to bypass the age line, a powerful spell placed by Albus Dumbledore himself around the goblet to prevent minors from participating. But there was his name, burning on the parchment spat out by the goblet. By the ancient magical rules that governed the tournament, anyone whose name was chosen by the goblet was obligated to compete, bound by an unbreakable magical contract. Harry was forced to become the fourth champion, creating an unprecedented situation. And can you imagine what Cedric felt at that moment? 1 second before he was the champion of Hogwarts. Now he had to share that honor, that glory, with a 14-year-old boy who shouldn't even be competing. The reaction at Hogwarts was mixed. Many, especially among Hufflepuff students, were furious. They felt that Harry had stolen Cedric's spotlight, that he had cheated somehow to put his name in the goblet despite being underage. The school divided, and many students began wearing badges that said, "Support Cedric Diggory, Hogwarts' real champion." Some of these badges had been enchanted to also show cruel messages about Harry, like "Potter stinks." It was a difficult moment, with high tensions and divided loyalties. On the other hand, Cedric knew his own fair nature. He had no evidence that Harry had put his own name in the goblet, and the expression of genuine shock on Harry's face during the announcement seemed real. Cedric struggled internally with these conflicting feelings, but his fundamental nature always prevailed. He chose not to feed hostility toward Harry, even when many of his housemates did. The first task of the Triwizard Tournament was finally revealed, though not officially. The challenge consisted of something almost unthinkable. Each champion would have to face an adult dragon and retrieve a golden egg guarded between the creature's claws. Dragons weren't just dangerous, they were practically impossible to control. Their scales were resistant to common spells, their fire could melt metal, and even experienced wizards thought twice before facing them. What chance would a 17-year-old student have against such a monster? But the most curious thing is that this information shouldn't have been revealed. And yet 3 of the 4 champions already knew what awaited them. Fleur Delacour had been discreetly warned by Madame Maxime, headmistress of Beauxbatons. Victor Krum discovered through Igor Karkaroff, Durmstrang's headmaster. And Harry Potter learned from Hagrid, who took him secretly to see the dragons hidden in the forest before the trial. The only one who knew nothing was Cedric Diggory, Hogwarts champion, precisely the student who most valued honesty and equality. When Harry realized this, he felt moral discomfort. It wouldn't be fair to let Cedric compete blindly while everyone else already had an advantage. So in an attitude that demonstrated the character that Dumbledore himself admired, Harry decided to tell Cedric what he had discovered. He found him on the Quidditch field a few days before the trial and approached discreetly. "Cedric, the first challenge involves dragons." That was all. No details, no extra advantage, just the truth. Cedric was surprised, almost without reaction for an instant, but understood the gesture immediately. It was an act of pure loyalty, coming from someone who was technically his rival. When the day of the first task arrived, the atmosphere at Hogwarts was one of pure tension. A colossal arena had been erected on the school grounds, surrounded by stands packed with students, professors, and international visitors. Each champion would face a different dragon, chosen randomly through small, enchanted miniatures. When Cedric Diggory's turn came, the miniature he drew revealed a Swedish short snout, a dragon with blue-silver scales and fire so hot it shone like incandescent steel. Cedric remained calm. He knew that attacking head-on would be suicide. Instead, he demonstrated the intelligence and precision that made him one of Hogwarts' best students. With a quick movement of his wand, he transfigured a stone into a dog, a living distraction, which began running and barking toward the dragon. The tactic worked for a few moments. The dragon looked away, following the magical dog, and Cedric took the opportunity to run toward the golden egg. But dragons are unpredictable creatures. The short snout turned suddenly, spreading its wings and launching a blast of fire directly at Cedric. The flames hit the side of his face, and he fell, screaming in pain. Even injured, he got up, staggering, and in an act of pure determination, grabbed the egg before retreating away from the creature. The audience exploded in applause, not just for the success, but for the courage they had all just witnessed. Cedric was rushed to be treated by Madame Pomfrey, who managed to heal the burns without leaving scars. Still, the memory of that pain would never leave him. The judges assigned scores that reflected both efficiency and bravery of the competitors. Cedric received respectable scores, showing that he could compete on equal terms with more experienced wizards. Although he didn't place first, he had proven something much greater: his courage, his loyalty, and his strength of character in the face of the impossible. During the interval between the first and second task, something significant and beautiful happened in Cedric's personal life. He began a relationship with Cho Chang, a fifth-year Ravenclaw student. Cho was intelligent, kind, and the talented seeker of her house's Quidditch team. There was in her a balance that calmed Cedric, a serene presence amid the turmoil and pressure of the Triwizard Tournament. For Cedric, who lived under enormous expectation, having Cho's support was essential. She encouraged him, listened to him, made him laugh when the task seemed overwhelming. Their relationship was light and sincere. Cedric was an attentive, respectful, and genuine boyfriend. He didn't see Cho just for her beauty, but for the person she was: curious, sensitive, and brave. Together, they formed a couple admired by all, an image of youth and balance. When the Yule Ball arrived, the tournament's great social event, Cedric invited her to be his date. On that magical night, Cedric wore his dress robes and Cho wore a silver-blue dress, sparkling under the enchanted lights of the main hall. The two danced the opening waltz, and for an instant, Cedric forgot the challenges, the scores, and the competition. Everything seemed in perfect harmony, a brief breath of normalcy amid the chaos. Even with the tournament ongoing, Cedric maintained balance. He trained, studied, fulfilled his prefect duties, and still found time for Cho and friends. This ability to reconcile everything showed a rare trait: emotional maturity and constant loyalty, regardless of pressure. It was during this period that he finally deciphered the golden egg's riddle. After countless attempts, Cho encouraged him to try something different. One night, Cedric took the egg to one of the enchanted bathtubs in the prefect's wing. When he opened it underwater, the deafening sound disappeared, and in its place emerged a melancholic and clear song. Come seek us where our voices sound. We cannot sing above the ground. And while you're searching, ponder this. We've taken what you'll sorely miss. An hour long you'll have to look and to recover what we took. The message revealed that the second task would take place in the Black Lake, and that the champions would need to dive to rescue something precious that would be taken from them, with only 1 hour to complete the mission. A few days later, Cedric crossed paths with Harry Potter in one of the corridors near the library. He immediately remembered the moment when Harry sought him out before the first task to warn him about the dragons. Now, it was his turn to reciprocate. Cedric approached with a discreet smile and said quietly, "Potter, if you want a tip about the egg, try listening to it underwater." Harry was surprised, but understood the gesture. There was no speech or formality, just a look of mutual respect. In that instant, the bond between the two champions strengthened. It was more than a friendly rivalry. It was proof that true nobility isn't in winning, but in acting with justice. The second task presented unique and frightening challenges. The Black Lake was deep, freezing and shrouded in shadows. Beneath its surface dwelt merpeople, grindylows, small water demons with long fingers and sharp teeth, and other creatures that few had the courage to face. The champions would need to find a way to breathe underwater for a full hour, swim with agility, and discover what they should rescue without knowing exactly what awaited them in the depths. The mystery was part of the challenge. Whatever was down there would only be revealed when they dove. Cedric, as always, prepared seriously and with discipline. He researched aquatic breathing spells, propulsion enchantments, and thermal spells to withstand the cold. He also studied the merpeople, analyzing records about their language and customs to avoid hostility. No detail went unnoticed. He was methodical, calm, and strategic. When the day of the second task arrived in February, the air was biting, and the Black Lake seemed even more sinister than ever. Magical stands surrounded the shores, filled with students, professors, and visitors, all anxious to see how the champions would face the unknown. Cedric looked at the dark surface and thought about who would be waiting for him down there. He still didn't know, but it would be Cho Chang, his girlfriend, placed in deep sleep among the lake's shadows, watched by the merpeople. Just imagining this, that someone he loved was there, defenseless, gave Cedric new strength. The tournament was no longer just about glory. Now it was personal. Cedric used the bubblehead charm, creating a sphere of air around his head that allowed him to breathe underwater. It was an elegant and effective solution, but one that required constant focus to remain stable. He dove into the Black Lake and felt the frozen shock of water pierce his body, even with protective spells. The darkness was almost total. Only the diffuse light from the surface guided him. Creatures passed in the shadows, grindylows, merpeople, and other presences that seemed to observe him with silent curiosity. Cedric swam with firmness and purpose. Soon he glimpsed shapes built in stone, the merpeople's village. In the center, before a large statue of a woman with a fish's tail, 4 people were trapped under suspended animation spells: Cho Chang, Hermione Granger, Gabrielle Delacour, and Ron Weasley. Without hesitation, Cedric approached Cho. She seemed to float serenely, her dark hair undulating in the water like silk. With a quick spell, he cut the enchanted ropes, held her carefully, and began ascending toward the surface. Time passed, and the lake's pressure increased with each meter, but he maintained focus. Cedric emerged almost at the same time as Harry, breaking the frozen surface with a gasping sigh. Cho was unconscious, but breathing, and as soon as the fresh air touched her face, she began awakening from the spell. Cedric took her to the shore, where Madame Pomfrey waited with blankets and warming potions. Cho was confused and trembling, but alive and unharmed. Cedric, exhausted, smiled. Not for the tournament, but for the simple relief of seeing her safe. When the judges announced the scores, Cedric received high marks, tying with Harry for performance and demonstrated loyalty. He had proven once again that true strength wasn't just in magic, but in honor, courage, and humanity. For Cedric, that result meant more than any trophy. Cho was well, and he had competed with integrity, exactly as he always believed a true champion should. After the second task, only the third and final trial of the Triwizard Tournament remained, and this would be the most decisive of all, the one that would define the true champion. The points accumulated in the first 2 tasks would determine the order of entry. Cedric Diggory and Harry Potter, tied in the lead, would be the first to enter side by side, followed by Victor Crumb and Fleur Delacour, who would start a few minutes apart. The final trial would be held on the Quidditch pitch, transformed into a colossal maze. For weeks, the living magical hedges had grown increasingly tall, reaching almost 6 meters in height. Dense and impenetrable, they blocked all vision and muffled even sounds. An oppressive silence hung over the field, but the real danger wasn't in the hedges. It was in what Dumbledore and the judges had placed inside. Dangerous magical creatures, enchanted traps, confusion spells and illusions designed to test every aspect of a wizard: courage, reasoning, endurance and self-control. It was a complete test, both physical and mental. The objective was simple but brutal: reach the center of the maze and touch the Triwizard Cup. Whoever reached it first would be the tournament winner, but the champions knew the path to it would be treacherous. Within those hedges, there would be no friends, no allies, only darkness, danger and decisions that would change everything. Ludo Bagman, the Ministry of Magic representative responsible for organizing the tournament, gave final instructions to the champions. He explained that wizard patrols would be positioned around the maze, ready to act in case of emergency. If any of the champions found themselves in grave danger, they just needed to cast red sparks with their wand, the signal to be rescued immediately. But there was one condition. It meant giving up. Bagman reinforced that the third task wasn't a fight between them, but a test of courage, wisdom and honor. "Competition is not war," he said with a nervous smile. "The cup is the prize, but integrity is the true merit." These words echoed in Cedric, who had always believed in the importance of competing fairly. Before the start, Albus Dumbledore approached the champions, observing each one with his intense and penetrating blue eyes. He spoke in a low but firm voice. "Remember, no prize is worth more than life. If the darkness seems too great, ask for help. Courage also lies in knowing when to stop." Cedric carried these words with him. There was something different in the air that night, a subtle tension, almost imperceptible but real. It was as if Dumbledore sensed that something was about to happen, even though he couldn't define what. The whistle sounded. Cedric and Harry entered the maze together, side by side, under the distant applause echoing from the field. As soon as they crossed the entrance arch, the sound of the outside world disappeared. The murmur of the crowd dissolved, replaced by a dense and cold silence. The high living hedges, about 6 meters tall, seemed to pulse slightly, enchanted to move, close passages and alter directions. The light was scarce, filtered between thick leaves. The air seemed heavy, and the environment suffocating. Right at the first fork, Cedric and Harry exchanged a quick look, respect, not rivalry, and followed different paths. Each knew what needed to be done. Inside there were no alliances, only courage. Cedric followed down a dark corridor, wand in hand, all senses on alert. With a quick movement he murmured, "Lumos," and the wand's tip glowed, spreading pale light between the dense leaves. The illumination helped, but also projected restless shadows. Shapes that seemed to move on their own, echoing the distant sound of leaves brushing against each other. The maze was a test of disorientation and resistance. The corridors folded upon themselves, changed shape, and sometimes the very ground seemed to move. Cedric didn't know if he had walked 10 minutes or an hour. Time inside there was different, as if the maze had a will of its own. Soon he encountered the first serious challenge, a living blocking spell. Ahead of him, a thick and shimmering mist covered the path, undulating in golden tones. With no alternative, Cedric entered. Immediately, gravity inverted. He found himself walking upside down, the floor and ceiling exchanging places in a confusing whirl. The sensation was nauseating, but he maintained focus, breathing deeply until crossing through the mist and emerging on the other side. The spell dissipated, and Cedric fell to his knees for a moment, dizzy but unharmed. He stood up, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and continued forward. The maze seemed to observe him, alive, changing shape around him. At each crossroads, Cedric moved calmly, wand ready, mind firm. He faced conjured wind explosions, illusory spells that distorted the path, and the distant roar of some magical creature he couldn't identify. Each obstacle required more control, more courage, but Cedric advanced, determined, focused, driven by the will to finish the tournament with honor. The boggart contorted, assuming a comical and harmless form before disappearing. Cedric breathed deeply. The encounter had left him shaken, but also reminded him of why he was there, not to prove he was the best, but to prove he was worthy. Shortly after, he heard something that froze his blood. Screams, sharp screams of pain and terror, echoing through the hedges. The sound came from confused directions, reflected by the maze's magical walls, but Cedric recognized one of the voices. It was Fleur Delacour. His instinct made him stop. He could continue. He was getting closer to the center, or he could follow the sound and try to help. But for Cedric, there was no doubt. Honor always came before victory. Following the sound as best he could, he ran through narrow corridors, wand firm in hand, heart beating strongly. When he reached the area where the scream seemed to come from, he found signs of a recent confrontation. Burned leaves, spell marks, and the ground covered with residual energy trails. No sign of Fleur, only the dense silence that follows something bad. Cedric raised his wand and cast red sparks into the air. The spell shot a jet of light that rose through the branches and exploded in the sky, visible even outside the maze. It was the emergency signal, a call for help to the patrol wizards. He stood still for a moment, trying to calm his breathing. He knew the act had cost him precious time. But for Cedric Diggory, no prize was worth more than someone's life. The red sparks would ensure Fleur was rescued. Cedric waited only long enough to see the flash cross the sky and be certain that the patrols had noticed the signal. Then he continued forward. He had lost valuable time, but knew he had done what was right. The air inside the maze seemed to become denser the further he advanced. The hedges vibrated with ancient magic, and an almost magnetic sensation seemed to pull him toward the center. He was close. He could feel it. His heart beat faster. Victory was within reach. It was then that he saw a flickering light ahead. He turned the corner, and there was Harry Potter. The two stared at each other for an instant, dirty, wounded and exhausted, but alive. There was respect in their looks, and a silent understanding of everything they had faced. Before either could speak, a low and horrendous roar cut the air. Something moved in the shadow of the corridor ahead, and then emerged, colossal and terrifying, an acromantula. Its thick legs beat on the ground like tree trunks, and its multiple eyes reflected the wand's light in flashes of terror. The creature lunged at them with brutal speed. Cedric reacted first, casting Stupefy, a stunning spell that hit the spider's body but only irritated it. It turned and struck Cedric, knocking him down with a leg that threw him against the ground. Harry advanced. Impedimenta! The spell hit the acromantula squarely, making it retreat a few meters, stunned for an instant. Cedric, gasping and with his face dirty with earth, got up, raising his wand. Now it was he who helped. Stupefy, Expelliarmus! The two attacked together, synchronized by the pure necessity of survival. The acromantula let out a sharp cry and dragged itself backward, wounded, before disappearing into the maze's shadows. For a moment, only the sound of their breathing broke the silence. Cedric looked at Harry and said with a tired half-smile, "You saved me. I should thank you for that." Harry shook his head. "Now we're even." Both laughed briefly, a nervous laugh, almost incredulous. When they raised their eyes, they saw, ahead of them, the Triwizard Cup, gleaming under an intense blue light in the maze's center. It was so close they could feel the magic radiating from it. They looked at each other, exhausted, covered in dust and scratches, but united by the same sensation. They had overcome everything the maze could throw at them. And destiny now awaited them. There was a moment of silence between them, both gasping, dirty and exhausted. The Triwizard Cup gleamed a few meters away, emanating a bluish and cold light. Harry broke the silence first. "Go ahead, Cedric. You deserve it. You saved me from the spider." Cedric shook his head, breathing with difficulty. "You saved me too, and you weren't obligated to compete. You were forced into this and still made it here." There was a short pause, charged with mutual respect. Cedric smiled slightly. "You got the dragons first. I got the mer people first. I think we're tied, aren't we? Let's take it together." Harry hesitated for an instant, then nodded. Together. The two positioned themselves side by side, the cup before them as the symbol of a shared victory. 1, 2, 3! Both advanced and extended their hands. At the exact moment their fingers touched the cup's cold surface, something happened. An invisible force pulled them violently, an intense pull at the navel, as if an invisible rope was dragging them through the air. The world spun, colors mixed, and then suddenly they fell hard onto hard and damp ground. Cedric got up quickly, staggering. The air was cold. There was no longer the sound of the crowd, nor the maze's glow. They were in an ancient cemetery, surrounded by worn gravestones and twisted trees. The moon filtered through dense clouds, and a mist crawled along the ground, illuminated only by the pale starlight. The wind whispered among the graves, bringing a cold that seemed to come from within the earth itself. A chill ran through Cedric. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Cedric looked around confused, his wand immediately in hand. What was happening? The cup should have transported them outside the maze, back to where the crowd was waiting, where they would be declared winners. Why were they in a cemetery? Harry was beside him, equally confused but also visibly alarmed. There was something in Harry's face, a growing fear that went beyond simple confusion. Harry said something about his scar, about it burning. Cedric didn't fully understand, but could feel that something was terribly wrong. Every instinct was screaming danger. This wasn't the triumphant ending of the tournament he had imagined. This was a trap. Then Cedric saw a figure approaching. It was small, wrapped in something, carried by another taller, hooded figure. The tall figure had something strange in its silhouette, something that wasn't completely human. And the thing being carried, that bundle, moved, and Cedric heard a voice. A cold, shrill and cruel voice that said only 2 words, but 2 words that would carry with them Cedric's destiny. Kill the spare. Cedric didn't even have time to fully process what was happening. He saw a flash of green light. He heard the words Avada Kedavra spoken with casual hatred. And then, nothing. The killing curse, one of the 3 unforgivable curses, the most terrible of dark magics, hit him squarely in the chest. There is no defense against the killing curse. No counterspell, no cure, no second chance. Cedric's life was instantly extinguished. Harry Potter was paralyzed. There was no sound, only the mute echo of the green light still engraved in his mind. Cedric's body lay beside him, and before him a terrible ritual began. Voldemort's rebirth, bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. Amid smoke and pain, the Dark Lord rose back into the world. Harry was tied, tortured and forced to duel. But when their wands connected, something inexplicable happened. Echoes of the dead souls, including Cedric, emerged, protecting Harry long enough to escape. With desperate effort, he grabbed Cedric's body and the Triwizard Cup. The pulling sensation tore him from that cursed place. In an instant, they were back at the Quidditch pitch. The crowd exploded in applause, until silence fell. What emerged from the maze wasn't the expected celebration, but incarnate tragedy. Harry held Cedric's body in his arms, screaming for help, his face covered with tears and dried blood. The audience didn't understand. Then came the screams, the panic, the horror. Amos Diggory broke through the crowd running, eyes wide. Upon seeing his son's body, he fell to his knees and screamed, a sound that no one would ever forget. He embraced Cedric, rocking his son's body, repeating "No, no, no" in a lament that broke everyone's heart. There was no spell, no power, no magic capable of consoling a father who loses a son, and on that field, under Hogwarts' sky, glory transformed into mourning. Cho Chang was among the students awaiting news, and when she learned of Cedric's death, she collapsed. The young man she loved, the gentle boyfriend who had danced with her at the Yule Ball, who spoke about the future with a confident smile, was dead. The news destroyed something inside her. For years, Cho would carry this silent pain, the memory of a love interrupted by cruelty and the feeling that nothing in the magical world was truly safe. All of Hogwarts entered mourning. Even those who didn't know Cedric personally felt the impact of the loss. He was Hufflepuff's pride, an exemplary student, talented and fair, who proved that heroism could come from kindness and not from ambition. His absence left a void that not even time could fill. Days later, the Great Hall was transformed into a silent memorial. The flags of all houses were collected, and in the center of the hall shone Hufflepuff's crest, wrapped in golden light. The students gathered in silence, and Dumbledore rose to the front, his face graver than ever. "Cedric Diggory was a young man of courage and pure heart," he said, his voice echoing between the walls. "At a moment when he could have acted out of selfishness, he chose loyalty and justice, and he paid the price of goodness in a world that sometimes doesn't know how to reward it." Harry heard the words with a tight chest, the weight of guilt suffocating each breath. He knew he couldn't have saved Cedric, but the memory of the green flash and the falling body would never leave him. Dumbledore finished the speech asking that everyone remember Cedric not just with sadness, but with pride, that he be remembered as a symbol of what was best in Hogwarts. And so, the school ended the year not with celebration, but with mourning and respect. Cedric Diggory had become more than a champion, a silent martyr of courage and decency. Cedric Diggory's death was also a turning point in the magical world. It was the first death directly caused by Voldemort's return, the first clear indication that dark times were returning. The Ministry of Magic, under Cornelius Fudge, initially tried to deny that Voldemort had returned, preferring to believe that Cedric had died in some other way, perhaps in a tragic tournament accident. But those who knew the truth, including Dumbledore and his Order of the Phoenix, knew that Cedric's death marked the beginning of a new war. For Amos Diggory, life would never be the same. He had invested everything in Cedric, all his hopes and dreams. Now he had to find a way to continue living in a world without his son. In the following years, Amos would be one of those pressing for justice, wanting to ensure that Cedric's death was not in vain. He would participate in efforts to recognize Voldemort's return and to prepare the magical world for the conflict that was coming. It was all he could do to honor Cedric's memory. Cedric Diggory's legacy is complex and moving. You see, he was, in many aspects, an innocent victim. He wasn't involved in the war between Harry Potter and Voldemort. He had no connection to the prophecies or events that led to the Dark Lord's return. He was simply a talented student who competed in a tournament and had the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. His death was arbitrary and senseless from the perspective of his own narrative. He was killed simply because he was present, because Voldemort saw him as an inconvenient and disposable obstacle. But it's precisely this arbitrariness that makes Cedric's death so powerful and significant. It represents the brutal reality of war and tyranny, which doesn't discriminate between the innocent and the involved, between those who chose to fight and those who simply had the misfortune of being present. Cedric became a symbol of all the lives lost in the war against Voldemort, all the good and decent people who were killed simply because evil people sought power. Cedric's memory also serves as a reminder that heroism isn't just about great battles or great planned sacrifices. Cedric was a hero in his daily life, in the way he treated people, in his consistent integrity, in his kindness and justice. He didn't need a great cause or dramatic moment to demonstrate his character. He demonstrated it every day in small and large choices, from offering to replay a Quidditch match to saving a competitor's life in the maze. This type of consistent and everyday heroism is as important, if not more so, than grand dramatic gestures. For the students who knew Cedric, especially those from Hufflepuff, his memory continues to be a source of inspiration and pride. He proved that you don't need to be the smartest, the most powerful, or the most famous to be truly great. He showed that hard work, decency, loyalty, and kindness have immense value. In a world that frequently glorifies raw power, manipulative cunning, or brilliant intelligence, Cedric represented something different and equally valuable. Cho Chang would eventually find ways to move forward with her life, although Cedric's memory would always occupy a special place in her heart. She would have other relationships, including briefly with Harry Potter, although that relationship was complicated by the fact that Harry had been present when Cedric died. But Cho learned to honor Cedric's memory by living fully, not letting the tragedy of his death prevent her from loving again and seeking happiness. That's what Cedric would have wanted for her. In the years after Cedric's death, during the Second Wizarding War that intensified when Voldemort took control of the Ministry of Magic, his name was frequently invoked. He became a symbol of resistance, a reminder of what was at stake and why it was worth fighting against the forces of darkness. Hogwarts students, especially those involved in Dumbledore's army, the secret defense organization led by Harry Potter, spoke about Cedric as a martyr, someone who had paid the ultimate price simply for being good and being in evil's path. When Voldemort was finally defeated in May 1998 during the Battle of Hogwarts, many thought of Cedric. His death had been one of the first signs of Voldemort's return, and now, 3 years later, the threat had finally been eliminated. The victory was bittersweet, as many other lives had been lost along the way, but there was a sense that justice had been done, that those who had died, including Cedric, had not died in vain. Amos Diggory lived to see Voldemort's defeat. Although this couldn't bring his son back, there was some consolation in knowing that the creature who had ordered Cedric's death had been destroyed. Amos continued working at the Ministry of Magic and became an advocate for reforms that would ensure better protection for young witches and wizards. He wanted to ensure that the type of situation that led to Cedric's death, where students were placed in mortal danger by supposedly responsible authorities, would never happen again. Cedric Diggory's story teaches us many valuable lessons. It reminds us that kindness and decency are not weaknesses, but strengths. That doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or costly, defines who we are. That competing with honor and integrity is more important than winning at any cost. That helping others, even when they are your competitors, is a mark of true greatness. And tragically, it reminds us that the world isn't always fair, that good people can suffer terrible fates, and that we must value and protect those we love, because we never know how much time we'll have with them. If Cedric had lived, he probably would have had a brilliant career in the magical world. With his skills, his character, and his reputation, doors would have been open to him. He could have become a professional Quidditch player, representing England in international competitions. He could have worked at the Ministry of Magic in a leadership position, perhaps eventually as Minister of Magic himself. He could have become a professor at Hogwarts, inspiring the next generation of students as he himself had been inspired. He could have married Cho Chang and raised a family, passing his values on to his own children. But all of this was stolen from him by a single spell pronounced by an evil man in a dark cemetery. Cedric's life was cut short before it really began, his potentials unrealized, his dreams unfulfilled. And that is the true tragedy of his story. Not just that he died, but that he never had the chance to live fully, to experience everything that adult life had to offer, to make all the contributions to the world that he would have made. But even in his death, Cedric Diggory left a lasting impact. He is remembered not as a victim, but as a hero. His name is spoken with respect and affection. His story is told to inspire others to be better, to choose kindness over cruelty, honor over convenience, courage over cowardice. At Hogwarts, generations of students learned about Cedric Diggory and what he represented. In Hufflepuff House especially, he became a legendary figure, proof that his house could produce wizards as remarkable as any other. Harry Potter carried the guilt of Cedric's death for a long time. He knew rationally that it wasn't his fault, that Cedric had been killed by Voldemort and Pettigrew, not by him. But he was there. He had suggested they take the cup together. He felt that somehow he should have protected Cedric, although there was nothing he could have done. With time, and with help, and understanding from others, Harry learned to process these feelings. He honored Cedric's memory by living according to the same principles that Cedric had demonstrated: courage, decency, and protection of the innocent. Cedric Diggory's life and death remind us that heroes come in many forms. Not all heroes are those chosen by prophecies, those who have special destinies written in the stars. Some heroes are ordinary people who simply choose to be good, consistently and completely. They do the right thing not because they're obligated to, not because they'll receive recognition or reward, but simply because it's who they are. Cedric Diggory was one of these everyday heroes, and that's why his story resonates so deeply. His death also teaches us about the true cost of evil and tyranny. Voldemort didn't care about Cedric as an individual. For the Dark Lord, Cedric was just an unimportant obstacle, something to be removed without a second thought. This casual devaluation of human life is one of the marks of true evil, and it's against this type of evil that people like Cedric, and like those who fought against Voldemort, stood up. They affirmed that every life has value, that every person matters, that we cannot simply discard those who are inconvenient to our plans. In the grand scheme of the war against Voldemort, Cedric Diggory was just one of many victims. But each individual victim was a complete person with dreams, loves, fears, and potentials. Reducing Cedric to just a number in a war statistic would be to commit the same mistake that Voldemort committed, failing to see the complete humanity of each individual. That's why it's important to tell Cedric's story completely, to understand who he was as a person, not just how he died. And this is the story of Cedric Diggory, a young wizard who was selected for Hufflepuff and lived his house's values completely. A dedicated student who worked hard and achieved excellence through effort and integrity. A talented Quidditch player who competed fiercely but always with honor. An attentive and gentle boyfriend. A beloved son who was his parents' pride. A Triwizard Tournament champion who faced dragons and merpeople and mazes with courage and intelligence. And finally, a victim of evil, whose life was taken too soon, but whose legacy of kindness and decency continues inspiring others long after his death. Cedric Diggory lived only 17 years, but in that short time he left an indelible mark on the world. He proved that you don't need a long life to have a meaningful life, that the quality of character is more important than the quantity of years, that how you treat people, how you conduct yourself, and the choices you make define who you are and how you'll be remembered. And by those measures, Cedric Diggory was an absolute success. He was, and always will be, remembered as a true hero. And this is how we end our journey through Cedric Diggory's life. a story of talent and kindness, of competition and compassion, of triumph and tragedy. A story that teaches us, inspires us, and moves us deeply. Cedric deserved much more time, much more life, much more opportunity to impact the world. But in the time he had, he showed everyone around him the meaning of true greatness, and that is something that will never be forgotten. I hope you enjoyed this deep journey through the complete story of Cedric Diggory, one of the noblest and most wronged characters in the Harry Potter universe. If this content touched your heart, if you learned something new about this Hufflepuff hero, or if you simply appreciate detailed analyses of the magical world, don't forget to leave your like on this video. It helps the channel grow a lot and reach more people who love these stories as much as we do. And please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos where we'll explore other characters, events and mysteries of the Harry Potter universe with this same depth and passion. We're very close to reaching the goal of 1,000 subscribers, and each one of you makes all the difference in this journey. Leave in the comments which character or story you'd like to see in the next video, and let's build this magical community together. Until next time, and remember, always be a true champion, just as Cedric Diggory was.